Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton, and I'm an Irish storyteller. It's my great privilege to guide you into a deep and restful sleep tonight. Before we begin, I invite you to settle in. Feel the softness of your pillow, the warmth of your blanket, and the gentle weight of relaxation washing over you. Take a slow breath in and out. Let the worries of the day fade into the distance. Now, come with me to a quiet place, far away from the noise of the world, where rolling green hills stretch beneath an open sky, and a kind-hearted vet tends to the animals of the Irish countryside. Let's step into his world and let the story carry you gently into sleep. The morning air was fresh, tinged with the crisp scent of damp earth and dewy grass. A soft mist curled over the green fields, resting like a delicate blanket over the land. The stone walls lining the narrow country roads were worn smooth by time, their rough edges softened by creeping ivy and tiny yellow flowers that peeked through the cracks. It was a peaceful hour, the kind that belonged only to the early risers, the farmers, the birds, and, of course, Michael Oaken, the Irish countryside vet. Michael's car rattled softly over the uneven road, its worn tires bouncing lightly over loose stones. It was an old motor, a little battered with age, but still reliable. It carried him faithfully from farm to farm, over hills and through valleys, past grazing sheep and sleepy villages still waking from the hush of night. He knew these roads as well as the lines on his own hands, each curve and turn etched into his memory from years of traveling between farms. A lone skylark sang from a distant hedgerow, its melody clear and bright against the still morning. Michael rolled down the window slightly, letting the cool breeze wash over him. The scent of damp earth and wildflowers filled the air, a reminder of the land's richness, of the life it held in its quiet embrace. Ahead, nestled between two gently sloping hills, was his first stop of the day. Mr. O'Connor's farm, the low stone cottage, stood sturdy and welcoming, its whitewashed walls glowing softly in the golden light of morning. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and in the pasture beyond, a small herd of cows grazed peacefully, their tails flicking away the occasional fly. Michael pulled into the gravel yard, the crunch of stones beneath the tires breaking the morning's hush. As he stepped out of the car, a familiar sound greeted him, a single, deep bark followed by the soft thump of a tail against the ground. Seamus, the old sheepdog, lay curled near the barn door, his grizzled face lifting in sleepy recognition. Michael smiled, kneeling beside the loyal dog. "Ah, Seamus, still keeping watch, are you?" He ran a gentle hand over the dog's rough coat, feeling the warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breath. Seamus sniffed at Michael's hand before resting his head back down, his tail wagging lazily in greeting. The cottage door creaked open, and out stepped Mr. O'Connor, wiping his hands on a rag. A stout man with weathered hands and eyes that had seen many seasons. He gave a nod of welcome. "Michael," he greeted, his voice steady and familiar. "Didn't expect you so early." Michael straightened, dusting off his coat. "The roads were quiet this morning. Thought I'd get a head start. How's the herd?" Mr. O'Connor motioned toward the barn, his expression thoughtful. "One of the heifers isn't quite herself, off her feed and lying down more than usual. Thought it best to have you take a look." Michael nodded, already moving toward the barn. "Good thinking. Let's have a look at her." Inside, the barn was cool and dim, the scent of hay and warm animals wrapping around them like a familiar old blanket. A few cows shifted lazily in their stalls, their ears flicking at the occasional buzzing fly. In the corner, the heifer lay curled in the straw, her large eyes watching them with quiet curiosity. Michael approached slowly, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. "There now, girl. Let's see what's troubling you." He knelt beside her, his practiced hands moving gently over her frame. Her breath was steady but warm, and as he placed a hand against her side, he felt the faint heat of a fever. Mr. O'Connor leaned against the barn door, arms crossed, watching with the quiet intensity of a man who had spent his life tending to animals. "She's one of the better ones," he murmured. "Steady milker. Hate to see her like this." Michael nodded, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Bit of a fever," he said finally, reaching into his worn leather satchel. "Nothing too serious. I'll give her an injection to help with the inflammation and leave you some powder for her feed. She should perk up in a day or two." Relief flickered across Mr. O'Connor's face. "Good to hear. I appreciate it, Michael. Always do." Michael gave a small nod, standing and dusting off his trousers. His hands had done this work 1,000 times before, and yet each case held its own quiet importance. These animals were not just livestock. They were a part of the rhythm of the land, part of the farmers' lives. He turned back toward Seamus, who was still watching him with those wise, tired eyes. Michael crouched down once more, rubbing the old dog's ears. "And what about you, lad? Still favoring that leg, I see." Mr. O'Connor chuckled, shaking his head. He's an old man, same as me, feels the damp in his bones." Michael smiled. "Well, I'll leave you some ointment for the stiffness. Rub it in when the weather turns, and he'll be right as rain." Outside, the sky had taken on a softer hue, clouds stretching lazily across the horizon. The breeze carried the faintest hint of rain, the kind that settles gently over the land like a whispered lullaby. Michael stood for a moment, breathing in the morning air, taking in the peacefulness of this place. It was a quiet world, steady and unhurried, moving at the gentle pace of nature itself. With one last nod to Mr. O'Connor and a fond pat for Seamus, Michael returned to his car. The engine rumbled to life, a comforting sound against the hush of the countryside. There were more farms to visit, more animals to tend to, but for now, he let himself savor the moment. The soft roll of the hills, the distant bleating of sheep, the timeless rhythm of life in the Irish countryside. And so, with the road stretching ahead of him, Michael set off once more, his heart steady, his spirit light, and the journey just beginning. The road stretched ahead, weaving like a gentle ribbon through the rolling green fields. The car hummed softly as Michael drove, its familiar rhythmic rattle blending with the sounds of the countryside. The mist of morning had begun to lift, revealing the patchwork of farmland, each field edged with its own stone wall, weathered and worn by the steady passage of time. Michael's next stop was a small farm tucked against the base of a low hill, where Liam Roach lived and worked. Liam was a younger farmer, sharp-witted and quick to laugh, though Michael knew that beneath his easy manner, he cared deeply for his animals. He had received word that Liam's pregnant sow had grown restless, and while there was no immediate alarm, the farmer was concerned. As Michael neared the farm, he spotted Liam standing by the gate, his flat cap pulled low against the breeze. He waved as Michael pulled into the yard, the tires crunching over damp gravel. The air smelled of rain, fresh and expectant, carrying the scent of damp earth and straw. Michael stepped out, stretching briefly, before reaching for his leather satchel. Liam greeted him with a grin, though there was a trace of worry in his eyes. "Michael, you're a sight for sore eyes," Liam said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "I don't know what to make of her. She's off her feed and restless. It's like she knows something I don't." Michael nodded, already scanning the farmyard with his experienced eye. "Let's have a look then," he said, motioning toward the barn. The barn was warm and filled with the familiar scent of animals and fresh hay. The light was dim, filtering through the small, dust-covered windows high above. In the far pen, the sow lay stretched out, her massive frame shifting restlessly against the straw bedding. Her ears twitched as Michael approached, her dark eyes watching him with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Michael crouched beside her, speaking in low, reassuring tones as he reached out to examine her. "There now, girl, let's see what's troubling you." His hands moved gently over her round belly, feeling for any signs of distress. He listened closely to her breathing, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. Liam stood nearby, his arms crossed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "She's been like this since yesterday," he said, his voice quieter now. "I tried tempting her with her favorite mash, even gave her a bit of apple, but she won't take it." Michael was quiet for a moment, concentrating as he felt the subtle movements beneath his hands. Then, finally, he sat back on his heels and looked up at Liam with a small, knowing smile. "She's close, but there's no trouble," he said gently. "Just discomfort from things shifting into place. It's normal at this stage. I'll leave you something to ease her discomfort, but she's healthy. You'll want to keep an eye on her tonight, though. If she starts farrowing, send someone for me straight away." Liam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief washing over him. He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "You've no idea how glad I am to hear that. I was half convinced something was wrong." Michael patted the sow gently before standing. "Ah, she's a sturdy one," he said with confidence. "Trust her instincts, and before you know it, you'll have a pen full of piglets keeping you up at all hours." Liam laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing. "A fine way to spend the night," he said, shaking his head. Michael grinned, tucking his tools back into his satchel. "Could be worse," he said lightly. "Could be a calving in the middle of a storm." As they stepped back outside, the air had changed, thicker now, cooler, carrying the faint scent of rain. The sky had darkened slightly, clouds rolling in from the west, their soft gray edges blending into the horizon. Liam tilted his head, squinting up at the sky. "Looks like we're in for a bit of rain," he mused. Michael nodded, pulling his coat tighter around him. "A soft day," he said, the old Irish phrase rolling easily off his tongue. The first few drops of rain fell lightly, tapping against the rooftops and the leaves of the trees that framed the farmyard. It wasn't a heavy rain, not yet, but it carried the promise of an evening wrapped in mist and quiet drizzles. Michael turned back to Liam, handing him a small brown bottle of medicine. "Give her a dose if she seems uncomfortable," he instructed. "And remember, if anything changes, send for me." Liam nodded, his grip firm around the bottle. "Will do, Michael, and thanks again." Michael simply smiled, tipping his hat slightly before stepping back toward his car. The soft sound of rain on the windshield greeted him as he slid into the driver's seat, the steady rhythm a comfort, a reminder of the quiet, unhurried pace of life in the countryside. He turned the key and the engine rumbled to life once more. Another farm, another animal cared for, another soul reassured. As he pulled back onto the narrow lane, he let out a breath, his heart light, his mind calm. The road ahead curved gently, winding through the vast, endless green, stretching toward whatever quiet calls awaited him next. And so, with the rain falling softly, the clouds drifting lazily above, and the land breathing in its own timeless rhythm, Michael continued on, his journey far from over, but his spirit as steady as the land itself. The soft patter of rain followed Michael as he drove along the winding country road, the rhythmic tap-tap against the windshield, a gentle lullaby of the land. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wild heather, and the world seemed quieter now, wrapped in the misty hush that comes before an evening shower. The hedgerows bordering the lane were thick with hawthorn and brambles, their green leaves glistening with raindrops. Beyond them, the rolling hills stretched into the distance, a patchwork of emerald fields separated by low stone walls, their surfaces softened by creeping moss. Michael's next stop was Mrs. O'Hay's cottage, a familiar place tucked along the edge of a small wooded grove, its weathered stone walls standing sturdy against time. The path leading up to the house was lined with wild roses, their delicate petals swaying in the cool breeze. As he turned onto the narrow lane leading to the cottage, two small terriers appeared at the gate, their wiry coats damp from the rain. One of them, a sprightly little thing, barked excitedly, its tail wagging like a metronome. The other, Finn, the sick one, stood still, ears flattened, tail tucked low. Michael sighed softly, already noting the signs of illness. He parked the car and stepped out, the scent of burning turf drifting through the air from the cottage chimney. The rain was light but steady, a fine mist that clung to his coat as he strode toward the house. The wooden door creaked open, and there stood Mrs. O'Hay, her shawl wrapped snugly around her shoulders. She was a small woman with bright eyes, her face etched with the lines of a long and busy life. "Come in, Michael, come in," she said, waving him inside. "You'll be soaked to the skin if you stand out there much longer." Michael stepped into the warmth of the cozy cottage, shaking the droplets from his hat. The room was bathed in golden firelight, the glow from the hearth casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The scent of freshly baked soda bread and steaming tea mingled with the smoky warmth of the turf fire, wrapping the room in comfort. Finn, the little terrier, padded slowly over to Michael, his movements hesitant but trusting. Michael knelt down, reaching out a gentle hand. "There now, Finn," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "Let's see what's troubling you." Finn pressed his damp nose against Michael's palm, his tail wagging faintly before he settled onto the hearth rug, letting out a small sigh. His breathing was shallow, and each exhale was accompanied by a faint, raspy sound. Mrs. O'Hay lowered herself into her worn armchair, her hands wringing in her lap. "He's not been himself for days now," she said softly, "barely eating, and he's been coughing something terrible." Michael ran his hands gently over Finn's ribs, feeling the subtle tremor beneath the wiry coat. The dog's nose was dry and warm, and as Michael listened closely to his breathing, He could hear the congestion settling in his lungs. After a moment, he nodded. "Lungs are a bit congested," he said, reaching for his stethoscope. "Could be a touch of pneumonia, but we've caught it early." Mrs. O'Hay let out a small breath of relief. "Oh, I've been worried sick," she admitted. "He's such a dear little thing, always at my heels. And now he barely moves unless I coax him." Michael gave her a reassuring smile as he prepared an injection from his satchel. "He'll be fine, Mrs. O'Hay. I'll give him something to help clear the infection, and I'll leave you some medicine to keep him comfortable. He'll need plenty of rest and warmth." Finn barely flinched as Michael administered the injection, his dark eyes trusting. He nestled closer to the warmth of the crackling fire, his tail giving the faintest wag, as if thanking Michael for his care. Mrs. O'Hay sighed, kneeling beside Finn and stroking his wiry fur. "Thank you, Michael. You're a godsend, truly. I don't know what I'd do without you." Michael brushed off his hands and gave her a small nod. "Just doing my job, Mrs. O'Hay. But if he's not improving in a few days, send word to me, and I'll be back." The fire crackled softly, filling the room with a gentle, rhythmic warmth. Outside, the rain tapped steadily against the small-paned windows, its sound blending with the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees. Mrs. O'Hay stood and smoothed her shawl. "Now, you're not rushing off just yet," she said firmly. "You'll have a cup of tea first. You can't be tearing around in this weather without something to warm you." Michael chuckled softly, knowing better than to refuse her hospitality. He settled into a well-worn armchair, stretching his legs toward the warmth of the fire as Mrs. O'Hay bustled into the tiny kitchen nook. The soft clatter of cups and saucers, the gentle hum of the kettle, and the rich, soothing aroma of brewing tea filled the room. On the hearth rug, Finn stretched out with a contented sigh, his breathing already easier. Moments later, Mrs. O'Hay returned with a tray of steaming tea and thick slices of buttered soda bread, the golden crust still warm from the oven. Michael wrapped his hands around the cup, savoring the warmth that seeped into his fingers. He took a slow sip, letting the rich, malty flavor settle on his tongue. Mrs. O'Hay stirred her tea thoughtfully. "You'll have heard about young Molly Connell, I suppose?" she said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Michael shook his head, biting into a slice of soft, fresh soda bread. "Can't say I have. What's happened?" Mrs. O'Hay leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice as if sharing a grand secret. "She's taken up with that old Donahue boy from over in Ventry. You know the one. Michael Donahue's youngest, tall lad with the red hair that looks like fire in sunlight." Michael chuckled, setting down his cup. "I know him well, always had a way with horses." "That's the one," she said with a grin. "Well, Molly's father is none too pleased, says the Donahues are nothing but trouble. Told her she was too young to be running after any boy, let alone one from Ventry." Michael laughed softly, shaking his head. "And what does Molly have to say about it?" Mrs. O'Hay grinned. "Ah, she's as stubborn as a mule, that one. Told her father she'll marry him or no one at all." They sat quietly for a moment, listening to the steady tap-tap of the rain against the windows, the warmth of the fire, the comfort of familiar company, and the peaceful rhythm of the evening wrapped around them like a well-worn blanket. And as Michael sipped his tea, he felt, for a brief moment, that all was exactly as it should be in the world. The warmth of the fire lingered on Michael's skin as he stepped out of Mrs. O'Hay's cozy cottage, pulling his coat tightly around him. Outside, the world had softened into the familiar hush of a gentle Irish evening. The rain, once a misty drizzle, had thickened into a steady, rhythmic patter, each drop tapping lightly against the earth. Michael took a deep breath, the cool air rich with the scent of damp earth and smoldering turf fires drifting from distant chimneys. The trees, dark silhouettes against the graying sky, swayed gently in the wind, their branches whispering secrets to the night. He turned back toward the house, where Mrs. O'Hay stood at the door, her shawl wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders, her small terriers at her feet. Finn, now warmed and comforted by the fire, wagged his tail faintly, his eyes brighter than before. "Thank you, Michael," Mrs. O'Hay called softly over the rain. "Safe travels to you." Michael tipped his hat, offering a small smile. "And a peaceful night to you, Mrs. O'Hay." With that, he climbed into his old, familiar car, the seat creaking as he settled in. The engine hummed to life with a soft grumble, the headlights cutting a golden path through the rain-dappled darkness. The road ahead was slick and glowing with reflections, the puddles shimmering under the dim light. He drove slowly and steadily, letting the hum of the engine and the gentle sway of the car match the unhurried rhythm of the night. His next stop was a small farm just outside the village, nestled in the crook of a low valley, where the fields ran right up to the base of the shadowed mountains beyond. The farm belonged to Patrick and Bridget Byrne, an elderly couple who had spent their entire lives on this land, their hands worn by years of tending to their sheep. As Michael approached, the dim glow of a lantern flickered in the barn, casting golden light through the gaps in the wooden planks. The Byrnes' youngest son, Eamon, stood waiting by the gate, bundled against the chill, his breath rising in soft white clouds in the cool night air. Michael rolled down his window slightly. "Evening, Eamon," he called. "What's the trouble?" The young man stepped forward, brushing damp curls from his forehead. "It's the sheep, Michael," he said. "A few of them seem restless, won't settle, pacing the pen. Da thinks one might be colicking, but he's not sure." Michael nodded, shutting off the engine and stepping out into the rain-darkened yard. The scent of wet straw and distant wood smoke filled the air as he followed Eamon toward the barn. Inside, the warm, musky scent of livestock and fresh hay wrapped around him like an old, familiar coat. The lantern's golden light flickered softly, casting gentle shadows along the wooden walls. 3 sheep stood together in one of the pens, their wool thick and slightly damp from the evening mist. One, a young ewe, paced back and forth uneasily, her breath coming in short huffs. Michael stepped closer, his voice low and soothing. "There now, girl," he murmured, his practiced hands moving gently over her belly. He felt for any signs of bloating, any tension that might indicate distress. Eamon and his father watched in quiet anticipation, the steady drip of rain from the barn's eaves, the only sound in the hushed space. After a moment, Michael straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She's a bit uncomfortable, but it's nothing to worry about," he said with a small smile. "A mild case of bloat, likely from eating too fast. I'll give her something to ease the discomfort." Relief flickered in Eamon's eyes as his father let out a breath. "You've a good way with them, Michael," the old man said, his voice thick with quiet gratitude. Michael offered a small chuckle. "It's not magic, Patrick," he said, kneeling beside his bag and pulling out a small bottle. "Just patience and a bit of experience." He administered the medicine, stroking the ewe's wool as he worked, his movements gentle and practiced. The lantern flickered as a cool breeze drifted through the open barn doors. Outside, the rain had softened again, falling in fine, misty sheets, soaking into the earth with a quiet persistence. Michael stood, brushing hay from his coat. "She'll be fine by morning," he assured them. "Make sure she's got plenty of fresh water and keep an eye on her overnight." Patrick nodded, his weathered hands gripping the railing. "Thank you, Michael. You've saved us another night of worrying." Michael smiled, clasping the old man's shoulder. "It's all in a day's work." As he stepped back into the cool night air, the rain tapped gently against his hat, the sky stretching wide and endless above him. The mountains in the distance were shrouded in mist, their dark peaks blending into the heavy clouds above. He climbed back into his car, the leather seat creaking under his weight. The engine purred to life once more, and he turned back onto the narrow lane, the rain-slicked road stretching before him. The world had grown quieter now, the village lights glowing softly in the distance, like fireflies blinking against the dark. Smoke curled from chimneys, the cottages nestled safely under the night's embrace. Michael let out a slow breath, his body settling into the familiar rhythm of the drive. His work for the evening was nearly done. One more stop, and then home. The thought of his own warm cottage, of the fire waiting in the hearth, and of Moira's quiet company filled him with a deep, settling contentment. The road stretched ahead, winding gently through the countryside, guiding him home. One last journey before rest. The rain continued its gentle melody against the car's windshield as Michael drove along the quiet country road. The world around him had settled into the deep hush of evening, the rolling hills now cloaked in soft mist, their darkened outlines barely visible beneath the heavy, silver-streaked sky. It was the kind of night that invited stillness, a time for rest, for warmth, for home. Michael could already picture his small stone cottage, its whitewashed walls softened by the flickering glow of lamplight, the welcoming scent of burning turf curling from the chimney into the cool night air. A faint smile touched his lips at the thought of Moira, his wife, who would no doubt be waiting for him, a book in hand, their red setter, Kai, curled at her feet by the fire. The very idea of stepping into that warmth, of sinking into the quiet comfort of home, filled him with a deep sense of peace. As he neared the familiar turning onto the lane that led to his cottage, the car's tires made a soft, wet sound over the gravel, the rhythmic hum blending with the distant murmur of the rain-soaked countryside. The house stood exactly as he had imagined, its small windows glowing softly, a beacon of warmth in the misty darkness. The front door, painted a deep forest green, was slightly ajar, the golden light from inside spilling onto the damp stone step. Michael pulled into the yard, shutting off the engine and listening for a moment to the quiet sounds of the night, the occasional bleat of a distant sheep, the rustle of wind through the hedgerows, the steady tap of rain against the leaves. Then, with a sigh of contentment, he pushed open the door and stepped out into the cool air, his boots sinking into the damp earth beneath him. Almost immediately, he heard the soft padding of paws, followed by a low, familiar whine. Kai, the red setter, emerged from the doorway, his feathery tail wagging in slow, lazy arcs. Michael chuckled, crouching down to rub behind the dog's ears. "There's my lad," he murmured, keeping watch, as always. Kai leaned into his touch before trotting back inside, his paws clicking gently on the wooden floorboards. Michael followed, stepping into the warm embrace of home. The scent of turf smoke and freshly baked bread wrapped around him like a well-worn blanket, the air thick with the quiet comforts of the evening. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, its amber glow flickering across the low-beamed ceiling and stone walls. Moira sat in her favorite armchair, her legs curled beneath her, a book resting open on her lap. She glanced up with a soft smile, her eyes warm and knowing. "Busy day?" she asked, her voice low and soothing. Michael sighed as he hung his damp coat on the peg by the door, rubbing the back of his neck. "Busy enough," he admitted, crossing the room and sinking into the armchair opposite hers. Kai padded over and settled at his feet, his deep sigh mirroring Michael's own. Moira closed her book, tilting her head slightly. "Tell me," she said, her voice filled with the quiet patience of someone who had spent years listening to his stories. Michael smiled, letting his gaze drift toward the fire, the flames shifting and curling, their movements slow and hypnotic. "Seamus is still stiff," he murmured, stretching his legs out before him, the warmth of the fire seeping into his bones. "Finn had a bit of a chest infection, but Mrs. O'Hay caught it early. He'll be right as rain in a few days." Moira chuckled softly. "And how's young Liam's sow? Has she given him a night of sleepless worry yet?" Michael grinned, shaking his head. "Not yet, but soon, I expect. He'll have his hands full before long." The room fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only came after years of shared companionship. Outside, the rain continued its gentle rhythm, tapping against the windows in soft, steady beats. Moira reached for the teapot resting on the small wooden table between them, pouring 2 cups of steaming tea, the rich aroma curling through the air. Michael took his cup, wrapping his hands around its warmth. The heat seeped into his fingers, loosening the last of the day's tension.